My name is Idy. My post-secondary journey had been an 8-year journey as I completed 2 degrees. So my first degree was a Bachelor of Science, and as I majored in biology and minored in psychology. As I went through the program, I knew that I wanted to go into a more professional path. So then, after completing that degree, I went on to a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy. And so now I'm a practicing pharmacist. I actually manage a pharmacy within the addiction and mental health realm. And so that's what I've been doing since graduation.
You want to tell us a little bit about your first your first year in university and then go into your 8th year, and why was it an 8-year run? What happened?
So it was an 8-year run because, well, in order to get into pharmacy at the time, you needed to complete at least a minimum of 2 years in order to accrue your prerequisite courses. And after 2 years, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to go down that path. So I decided to go through a whole degree first, while I was still making my decision as to whether I would pursue nursing or pursue pharmacy thereafter. And so after the 4 years of my first degree is when I had applied into pharmacy. And then pharmacy itself is a 4-year degree program. And so that's why it was a total of 8 years altogether. In terms of my first year in university, it was very different from my last. My first year, I mean, first of all, the programs are vastly different. The course load intensity is very different. And so my first year was a cruise for me because in high school, I had actually been part of the IB program. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's an international baccalaureate high school diploma program where you're in a bit of a higher level than most of the regular people or most of the regular stream. And so I was already used to having to perform at a high level. And so, yeah, my first year was super easy for me because I just carried on my same habits that I had from before. But as I continued in my journey through university, and as I continued to, or as the class sizes started to whittle down, and the program that I went into got more competitive, it became much more challenging for me, and I couldn't rely on the same old habits that I carried on from high school. And that's what I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit more today.
Have you always had good time management, or how did that work for you? Time management to be able to keep your skills alive, essentially.
I have not always had good time management. And in fact, most of my friends, at least the friends I had in the beginning of university, would have described me as a procrastinator. And that's a bit of what I was alluding to before, in that I was just always used to performing well with a very minimal preparation work. And so I carried on those terrible habits into post secondary as well. Um, and it wasn't until I would say my pharmacy degree that I finally had to refine what I was doing a lot more and actually implement time management into my university career. So I'd say my first year of pharmacy as well was not too bad, but my second year was a complete awakening for me. Like the course load intensified much more. It was a modular based program. So in one semester of, let's say my first degree, you would be doing 5 courses in a semester, whereas in pharmacy, you would maybe be doing 8 to 10 to 12 courses in one semester, because most courses lasted about 3 to 4 weeks, and then
Right.
you move on to the next one.
Would that be including labs, those 8 courses,
Oh,
or?
no, no, no. Those are 8 separate courses. So within each course, you would have lectures, seminars, labs, presentations, group work, volunteering, all, kind of associated with some, maybe not all, but with some of the courses. And so, yeah, you'd had a very tight schedule, and midterms would roll around within the first couple of weeks of the course starting. And so I couldn't obviously keep up with what I was doing prior. And that's when I really had to change my strategy, because after I got my marks back from my first set of midterms, I realized, okay, I can't keep on procrastinating and just kind of posting through, especially because you're being ranked amongst other high performing individuals, and your grade isn't just your mark on the exam against everybody else and how else they're also performing. And so in order for me to be able to get back to the high grades that I was used to, I had to start to reprioritize my goals a little bit and change up how I was actually using my time.
Okay. Now, what sort of methods did you implement in order to change your ways?
So, there's lots of different ways, especially because I was like, part of like student groups and whatnot. And so it'll vary per person and what their needs are, as well as what other commitments they have going on. So for myself, I was working two part-time jobs in an intensive program, as well as part of student groups. And I didn't want to let those things go because academic performance is important, but my social and my financial life is also important as well as a student. And so for me, the first thing I had to do before I implemented any strategy was just to sit down and actually analyze how I was spending my time. And I think that, like, I always give that advice to anybody is just sit down and observe what you're currently doing, because you can't change anything until you have that awareness of how you are actually spending your time and what's working and what's not working. And so I often found that I would be studying last minute, like perhaps a night or two before the exam. And I would study for a long amount of time, but they were always very condensed. So I would have like 15-hour study sessions, which is not productive for any student whatsoever, because you're not really retaining as much as you can be if you're preparing well ahead of time. And so that was the first thing I noticed, is that I just left things to the last minute, and that I was perhaps maybe working a little bit too much as well. So I had to scale that back a little bit. And my commitments to my student group still remain the same, because I didn't find that I was wasting a lot of time with those activities. But I also found that my study sessions were also not efficient, because I would be on my phone a lot, take multiple breaks, which you do need breaks, but I was taking an excessive amount of breaks, if we're being really honest. And like I said, the biggest factor was just not preparing ahead of time and condensing everything and just intensifying how much stress that I would be under. So once I became aware of that, I started to kind of go through the tasks that I needed to do in order to, let's say, prepare for an exam. So, if you have a course and there are hypothetically 4 units within the course, then I would, divide up how much time I wanted to spend on each unit in order to, study the material, retain the information, practice application of the information prior to an exam. And a tip that I actually learned from a friend was to treat that, make a fake deadline for yourself. So if something is due, let's say in 4 weeks from now, pretend it's actually due in 2 weeks. And so then you would, break down your time and determine how much time you need to spend on each task, meet the goal of completing a task in 2 weeks, and then you still have another 2 weeks to go over the information again, practice it as many times as you need to get really comfortable in it, in order to be successful in whatever it be, an exam, an assignment, an essay, a presentation, whatever the case may be. I also used Google Calendar a lot. With my school, we had access to that application. And I found that just based on the number of activities I had to do and the amount of exams and assignments, in order to keep up, it was just easier for me to pre-schedule everything in. So at the beginning of a course, I would mark in all the deadlines, as well as schedule in tasks, like actually block out chunks of time to study. Because sometimes we don't think, like, we think that those things should be automatic, but they aren't. Like, sometimes you're tired, you come home from school after sitting through 6 or 7 lectures, and you want to relax and rest. But if you just dedicate maybe an hour or 2 in the evening to review the material, it helps out in the long run so that you're not under pressure to review everything in 1 or 2 nights before an exam. And so yeah, using an agenda, because I also like to physically write things down, were good to help me keep up with getting tasks done. And then using my Google Calendar for scheduling and, the deadlines and events, as well as like, my work schedule and my school extracurricular activities that I was involved in as well.
Okay. Now, did you seek out help, external help aside from, let's say, the self-organization? Did your parents help you, friends, any outside source help you with organization?
Absolutely. So I didn't actually, go towards my parents for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I feel like maybe there's a sense of pride in feeling like you have to have everything together. But I did reach out to a friend of mine whom I would deem, an expert in organization, especially time organization, as well as an older cousin who went through pharmacy school as well prior to me. So she knew what the workload was like. She knew how demanding it was. She showed me her own system of how she would take notes and what amount of time she would allot to reviewing the material and preparing for exams and participating in study groups and all of that. And so, yes, in addition to the self-organization, having those other people help to guide me, especially people that had been through it already, was pivotal for me because one, I knew that they had already gone through the process and there were people that I could trust. And then two, it was just nice to have an outside perspective, take a look at, how I was doing things and to make suggestions as to how I could improve.
That's good. It's always good to have outside support as well as your own self help, just because somebody else's point of view may give you an insight on their ways of doing things. Might be good, might be bad, but that's your choice to take, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I noticed you said that you've always kind of been academically gifted. If if it wasn't pharmacy school and was something, I guess, less rigorous, do you think you would have noticed your lack of time management skills?
You know what? Being that um, just how my I feel like for me, what made me change my ways was starting to see my academic performance decline. And so perhaps if I was in another program where it wasn't as rigorous, those old habits may have continued on until you're met with the real world and you're met with work deadlines and whatnot. But I do feel that that was a pivotal part of um, refining who I've become now in terms of time management was being in an intensive program, quite honestly, because I was so used to performing so well. I needed an outside force almost to come in and wake me up to realize that things may not always continue to be the way that they have been. And so I do need to have those background skills in place in order to adapt to things being more intensive. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
for sure. How would you describe your time management skills or yeah, time management skills now?
Now it is markedly improved compared to how it was as a student. I was starting out as a student because those those skills continue on, or the need to keep up with those skills continue on in order to be successful in your career and your day-to-day life, right? So beyond I like to emphasize for students that these are lifelong skills that you need to learn in terms of time management because they will carry you through to being successful in other areas. So whether you go on to your career or, additional extracurriculars, if you want to be part of, a committee in your community, if you want to be able to contribute in other ways that are also non-financial, and you want to be able to do all those things at the same time, you have to be able to manage your time well. And so I like to say that I'm a lifelong learner in terms of time management because there are tools and things that I continue to pick up as the years go on. I'm definitely not perfect at it, but it is something that I'm much better at than I used to be. And the biggest takeaway I like to share with other people is if you're not good at time management, it doesn't mean that you'll you'll be stuck being poor at it forever. It is something that you can learn and you can continue to improve on over time.
Aside from, because again, when we're gifted in areas, we don't put as much time into it.
Right.
Other than being good at school, why do you think that you lacked time management skills earlier on?
Mm, that's a great question, actually. You know what? I think it could have also been a multitude of factors. Um, I think my attitude was different then. I just didn't think it was a thing, if that makes sense. It wasn't really a thought that I put any kind of energy towards because I didn't see the necessity in it. Like I was just so focused on getting into school, achieving whatever I needed to do, and moving on that I just didn't really think that there was any other benefit to putting time into a skill that I didn't even think was a necessity, if that makes sense. Um, I do also feel that aside from time, I was not a very organized individual. And so naturally with, my lack of organization and my high academic performance, I just never really put a thought into it, if that makes sense.
It does. I think that's very important also because you're not the only person that I mean academics come too easy, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes when we fall into that trap, it's almost like, oh, I can do it later. It's not that hard, or we just put it to the side. But
Right.
we forget that as as we move on through life, things become more rigorous. There's more pressures. There's less time to make a decision. So a lot of times we just kind of let it relax until we can't do it anymore, and then we.
Absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to say there is with being a student, that's your main job. At the time you're a student, you're just focused on school. I mean, like I said, some students may be involved in other things in areas of their lives, but primarily your focus is to be a student. You don't think of any other responsibilities that may come along later in life that will require you to shift your mindset and to value time management. And so that could have possibly been a reason why it just wasn't at the top of my priority list, nor was I even really self-aware that it was a thing that I needed to master in order to be successful throughout life. So yeah, that's a good point too.
Okay. Now, seeing how far you've come, what would you say was your biggest eye opener? Like what made you say, hey, you know what, man, this is not working. I know I recognize you said that when your grades started to fall, but
Right.
aside from your grades, were there social aspects involved? Was there anything else?
I did find that I was constantly playing catch up. Um, so prior to making a change in my habits, so I found that I had less time to partake in hanging out with my friends or spending time with my family. I was constantly stressed. And at the time, I didn't see it as a dysfunctional pattern because I felt that, oh, I work well under pressure, and this is just how things are. That if I tried to do things earlier, my attention span wouldn't really be there. And so it was just easier to wait till the last minute to get everything done. But I did find that, yes, in addition to my grade slipping, I just was under just a constant state of stress and anxiety. Um, and like I said again, I didn't really recognize that as a dysfunctional pattern at the time until things shifted. And then I realized, wow, I have much more time to actually take a break and not feel guilty about taking a break. I have time to spend with my friends. I have time to spend with my family. I have time to spend doing my extracurricular activities and also not feel guilty. My confidence increased because just when you have this sense of preparedness before going into anything, you just, it's just this natural confidence that comes with it. And immediately, I didn't necessarily see that, but as time went on, and as I was consistent in practicing better time management, I noticed that there was just a shift in my overall stress levels and my ability to enjoy my other activities, because I was able to manage my time much better.
Okay. Now, hearing you talk, I feel like for me, I would assume you had great time management skills because you were involved in a variety of things throughout your school career, right? You were a part of the social committee, I believe, um,
Mhm.
a bunch of different things. So from the outside looking in, it may have seemed perfect, like you
Yes,
had time to do everything, but that's that's almost like a dangerous thing because a lot of students do suffer from time management, but from the outside again it looks good, but nobody really knows how they're able to hold it together.
absolutely. I think I was an expert at filling in my time. I
Mhm.
was really good at overcommitting myself sometimes, and I knew in my academic pursuits and in terms of, participating in as many activities as I could to help support me in my applications to my professional programs. I knew I needed to be a well-rounded student. And to me, being a well-rounded student was participating in multiple things. However, participation does not equal management, or at least efficient management of your time. Now, ironically, if you're able to manage your time well, you can participate in more and more things, but simply filling up your schedule does not equate time management, if that makes sense. And so, yes, from the outside looking in, I had a very full schedule. I was involved in multiple things, but deep down, I was very stressed because I wasn't efficiently allocating my time to the various things that I needed to do in order to be satisfied, feel fulfilled, and feel just like less stressed in general, and know that each thing is being attended to appropriately. I just kept packing in as much as I could, and then constantly playing catch up to get things done for each facet of my life.
Okay. If you were to have a do-over, would you have still participated in all those groups or social committees or
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like your academic journey is more than um, simply about your grades. Like, you absolutely need a social experience as part of your academic experience as well, because it helps to make you a well-rounded individual. It helps to expose you to things and interests that you may not have realized that you had. And so I don't regret participating in those activities. What I regret is that I didn't implement the ability to participate well enough in a non-stressful manner.
out of all those extracurriculars that you did, which
Mhm.
one would have been your favorite?
Which one was my favorite? That's a great question. I was a volunteer coordinator actually for the African Students Association at the university that I went to, and I got to meet a lot of people. We put together a lot of social events, and it was just nice seeing how many people came together to support the community and to support initiatives that we had, just to increase awareness of our cultures amongst the university, and just to have a safe haven for African students to also partake in their culture and learn about each other's cultures as well. So that would have been my most treasured moments, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Which one do you wish you weren't a part of?
Which do I wish I was not a part of? Um, You know what? I can't think of an experience that I would say that I wish I wasn't a part of. Like, there might have been ones that I did not like as much as others, but I feel like every experience has taught me a lesson and has, kind of taught me what my interests are and what my interests are not. And so I don't regret going through any of the activities that I did because I think it did make me the person that I am today. And so, yeah, no regrets there.
Okay. Now, we're gonna take you through a journey of your university experience. If you had a do-over,
Mhm.
what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Huh. Um, I think that I would have reached out to or reached out for more mentorship. Um, I feel like that's one thing I didn't have or I didn't lean on as much going through my university career. I did have a lot of questions. Like I said, I wasn't really sure what career path I would end up in. And rather than reaching out to other people that were in the career that I wanted to be in or that I considered being in, I just kind of did my own independent research. Rather than talking to people that were actually in the field. And so if I had to go over the experience all over again, it would be to reach out to people that were actually in the fields of interest that I was curious about. As well as just reaching out to people that had been through the university experience to help guide me on essential skills that are needed, such as time management, you know, before going into it, because like I said, I wasn't even aware that it was a skill that I needed. It was an afterthought for me. Whereas I feel like if I had had, like, let's say, a conversation like that you and I are having now, I would have thought, huh, perhaps I do need to restructure my life a little bit differently to be able to perform as efficiently as possible, but then also get fulfillment, knowing that my time is being well utilized.
Is there anything, like, let's say advice? Is there an advice that you would want to give to a grade 12 student right now going into their program? Would you suggest to take their time? Would you suggest to take a year off? Would you suggest go right into it? What would be your advice to a student right now going into
I
grade 12?
would say take your time, as pun intended with this topic, but I would definitely say take your time. I went straight from university, and I was also young at the time that or sorry, I went straight from high school to my first program and then to my next program. And I was young when I graduated high school. I was 16, and truthfully, I did not really know what I wanted to do at the time, but I just kind of came from a household where it was expected of me to be in school or to be doing something. And so I just went boom, 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 straight into programs. It turned out well. Like I love the career that I'm in. However, I feel like perhaps my experience would have felt a little bit more enriched if I felt like I was being more intentional with my decisions. And I think giving yourself the time, especially when you're at that age, is important too. So, the university experience is also a self-discovery experience, and it does one person's path may not look like the next person's path, but I do think it's important to give yourself the time to experience things and to understand who you are and to understand what your interests are. And I did it through exploring activity, but perhaps that may not be for everybody. And maybe some people might need a year off or so to kind of explore what they need. And also a year off helps you save a lot of money for post-secondary as well. And if you work for a year, maybe you don't have to work as much throughout the school year as well. So there's give and take to everything, but I always promote taking your time to understand your interests and what you like, and then to pursue them accordingly.
Okay. In terms of time management, what's the most important thing you want any student to take away from your interview today?
The most important thing is to start early. Um, I think I had either attended a talk or received advice from someone that said that, you don't have to wait until you need a skill to learn it. You can toy around with it, practice it, even with just a small number of activities. So you don't need a full schedule to practice time management. You can have two things that are in your day-to-day routine. But if you're being active in how you're scheduling them into your day, as well as how much time that you're allotting to each activity, that itself is a good way to start. being active and participating in time management. So yeah, my biggest thing is to start it early, to realize that it is a necessary skill and a lifelong skill that will carry you beyond school, and that you can start it at any time. Like I said, I was known as a procrastinator amongst my friends, and that doesn't have to be your identity forever. You can literally choose to start today if you'd like to be more aware with how you're spending your time, because it will give you more fulfillment in the long run if you're being an active participant in how your time is being managed. Because you can't create more time, it's a limited resource, but you can certainly impact the way that you spend your time.
Good, good. Last question.
Okay.
Your university experience, do you think that the time management skills that you've learned throughout your university experience has helped you to create who you are today? Or do you feel like, you know what, university was rigorous, but now in my life I can kind of just relax. My work is not as hard as the university was, or what's the major difference between your university experience and your career, essentially?
I think the main difference is the activities that I'm involved in, but not necessarily the skill. So the skill itself, it evolved throughout my university experience, but it is something that I do actively practice today in my day-to-day life. And so the foundational skill is no different. I know that, generally what I try and do is plan out my days ahead of time. And so sometimes I plan out a month in advance, sometimes I plan a week by week. It just kind of depends on what my schedule is filled up with. But that's just the thing too, is I've learned to be able to adapt and to make it flexible for myself depending on what I need. But the only difference is just what my days look like. But the foundational skill is definitely there. You need to be able to time manage beyond just school. And so being able to, plan your time out in chunks and plan it out ahead of time is absolutely essential to being successful, even in your day-to-day life.
Okay. One last question, I promise. What's more stressful, university or career?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. It depends on what your career is. It absolutely depends on what your career is. I would say that university was a little more stressful but mainly because some of the skills that I now have as a result of finishing my university experience and continuing on to use those skills were lacking back then. And you just have many courses that you're trying to complete at a very, finite amount of time. Whereas, depending on what career you go into, some things are project-based and you might have a little bit more time to complete it. And you don't have as many activities that you're trying to accomplish, at least from a deadline perspective. And so for that reason alone, I would say school. But like I said, at the end of the day, it really depends on what career path you go into and what level you get to in your career, because as you go higher and higher, there are usually more expectations, expected of you, and you might be juggling multiple projects at the same time. And so it depends. But one thing I can definitely say is if you establish good habits, then it'll continue to allow you to be successful as you spill over into your career and other areas of your life beyond career.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is because a lot of students that I've talked to would say they feel university or post-secondary is very stressful, and their expectation for their career might not be as stressful. But you pointed it out when you said the skills that you've adapted or learned throughout your university has helped you become better
Absolutely.
in your career, right? So if you didn't learn those skills in university, it would be much harder for you in your career.
Exactly. Like I said, you can generally learn most life skills at any point in time, but if you learn it earlier, especially when you're in, I want to say like a simulated environment, which is what I consider school to be, it pays off much longer in the end because it'll make you a standout applicant or a candidate when you're applying for jobs. And it would just be horrible to have to learn time management when you're already in your career and there are financial expectations that your boss may have of you, or you're working within a team setting and what your work is may impact your next colleague. And so I just feel that it's better to learn those skills through post-secondary than to have to scrounge together at the last minute to just learn it in your career.
Okay. I think that's perfectly said. I want to thank you again for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
I think we had a really good conversation. A lot of it was very informative, right? And I feel like students need these kind of information to get out there because not everybody knows. Just like you said, you didn't even realize that time management was a thing. For you, it's just you're doing what you need to do until you realize that, oh, I need to manage my time better.
Absolutely.
Right? Maybe if somebody hears this or sees this, they could realize, hey, you know what? Even though I'm doing this well right now, I'm not putting enough effort into doing it well. I'm just doing it well. But now I'm putting more effort into doing it better and seeing how much more time I have for something else.
Absolutely. There are, strategies in place, or there are strategies that exist that if you practice can help you achieve a goal in a much more efficient or a much less stressful manner. And I'm hoping that out of this conversation that you and I are having, someone will definitely take a look at it and say, perhaps there is a different way I can be doing things that will carry me, throughout my life and be a more sustainable approach as to what I may be currently doing. And that's what I went through.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to tell our viewers before we go, like where they can find you? If like you're anything you want to tell them at all, or say, would you advise somebody to go into pharmacy? Do you like the career?
I absolutely love the career. I think that when I first got into pharmacy, I always thought that there were only two paths I could take. I could either work in the community or I could work in hospital. But in my own career path, I found that there's so many things I can do with it. I currently work in a clinic setting, which is kind of like having a nice crossover between community and hospital. And I also work in a pretty niche environment. I absolutely love addiction. I love mental health. And I also do consultation work for a company with the States where I, answer questions for an online health community and write articles if there are enough questions that people are having about a certain topic. And so you can really do a lot of different things in your career. And I feel like when I was going through school, I didn't realize that there was just such diversity within my profession. And so for that reason, I would definitely recommend people go into pharmacy if they have a true interest in pharmaceuticals and healthcare and, optimizing patient care. And so, yeah, I'm a little biased, you can say, but I would recommend the career path for sure.
Perfect. That sounds good. Again, thank you very much for sitting down with us today. I really appreciate your time. I feel like we've covered enough to let people know how time management affects your future, essentially.
Absolutely. It's not just about the now, it's about later as well too.
Perfect.
And this might sound a little punny, but time management can improve over time as well. So
all right. Thank you very much, Idy. I hope you have a great day. And you have my information. You can reach out to me at any time if you have more information for me.
All right. Thank you, Idy. Take care.